The next item of business is topical questions. At question number 1, I call Evelyn Tweed.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what engagement it has had with SEPA and Scottish Water regarding the serious diesel pollution incident that has taken place in the River Dockhart and the environmental risk to the wider River Tay system following reports that diesel spread to Loch Tay over the weekend.
Cabinet Secretary Gillian Martin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Government was advised of this incident on Friday and has received regular updates throughout the weekend. Clearly, it's a serious incident, and I would firstly like to thank those responding for their very quick actions. I'm pleased to hear that Scottish Water and the Health Board have agreed that as of this afternoon, all remaining restrictions on using tap water can be lifted and the water is safe to drink. I understand the environmental situation is stabilising and efforts to contain the pollution at source are thankfully proving effective. SEPA inspections suggest that the east end of Loch Tay remains clear and no impacts have been identified in the River Tay.
Evelyn Tweed.
The diesel spill from the Certus fuel station at Lixtoll has led to a complex multi-agency response. How will the Scottish Government support these agencies to assess and mitigate any ongoing impacts of this incident on wildlife and public health in a timely manner?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank Evelyn Tweed for that. SEPA, Scottish Water, Public Health Scotland have supported this multi-agency response since it happened. For impacts on the environment, SEPA has attended incident management team and local resilience partnership meetings which help coordinate the complex response. SEPA is undertaking ecological surveys and wider assessments to understand the impact on wildlife and will continue to work with public bodies to assess and mitigate impacts of this incident on public health and the environment. In relation to public health, Scottish Water and the Health Board have agreed that as of this afternoon, all remaining restrictions, as I've said, on using tap water can be lifted, the water is safe to drink. In line with drinking water regulations, Scottish Water will continue to check the drinking water in Culzean to ensure that this meets the strict public health requirements that are there. Once the immediate incident has been resolved, their drinking water quality regulator will undertake an investigation into this incident, and this report will be published in due course. And of course, we'll continue to work with SEPA and Scottish Water to support considerations and activities as appropriate.
Evelyn Tweed.
The local community has expressed their gratitude for Scottish Water's swift response. I put on record my thanks to them. This incident has had a huge impact on the local community, including the operation of care homes, dentists and hospitality businesses. Can the Scottish Government outline what support is available to impacted businesses?
Cabinet Secretary.
Evelyn Tweed is absolutely right. Throughout the weekend, the residents of Culzean have been impacted and been unable to use water for all the purposes that it is there for. I'm very grateful to SEPA, Scottish Water and other public bodies for their very swift response to the pollution incident. And while this has reduced the potential impacts we've seen, there has undoubtedly been challenges for the local community and businesses. Scottish Water worked to ensure customers had supplies and support that they needed, including door-to-door bottled water deliveries, and I am pleased that the remaining restrictions on using tap water have now been lifted, which will ease a lot of the impact on businesses. However, I appreciate some businesses will need additional advice. Where this is the case, I would encourage them to contact Scottish Water's customer support.
Stephen Kerr.
Well, given that Police Scotland have indicated that there is no criminality that can be established, what regulatory enforcement action is SEPA now considering under environmental protection legislation? And can the Cabinet Secretary confirm whether SEPA had previously inspected the site in question, when that inspection took place, and whether any compliance concerns were recorded at the time?
Cabinet Secretary.
Yes, I'll need to write to Stephen Kerr about the latter part of his question there, because he's asking about things previous to the incident, and of course I can catch up with SEPA and they can let me know if that were the case. I understand that SEPA are engaging with Police Scotland, and anyone who does believe that a crime has been committed in this instance should report it to Police Scotland and be able to investigate appropriately, but I cannot comment on live police investigations.
Mark Crossgill.
Presiding Officer, I visited Culzean over the weekend. What I saw was a community who is doing an incredible job supporting each other. They're also very grateful for the work of Scottish Water. But they're a community who are also angry with Certas, the owners of the Lixtoll filling station, who have left that facility vulnerable and abandoned for months on end. Can the Cabinet Secretary confirm whether Police Scotland have uncovered any evidence of a theft of diesel at the site, as alleged by Certas? And can she tell the Chamber what actions will be open, not just to SEPA but to other regulators, to punish Certas and seek compensation if they are found to be liable for this pollution incident?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, Mark Ruskell will appreciate that I can't share any detail about anything that's happening with regard to a police investigation, but SEPA are engaging with Police Scotland, and of course, if there are witnesses to anything which they believe might have been illegal activity, they should of course contact the police. Indeed, if anyone wants to contact Scottish Water's customer support staff as well, or anything around the whole situation, they should do so on 0800 0778 778. But for anything around the causes of the incident that they think are suspicious, it is the police they should contact.
Mercedes Villalba.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. According to news reports, SEPA confirmed that a specialist clean-up contractor was working to reduce the environmental impacts of this spill. This is the latest in a long line of outsourcing decisions taken by the environmental regulator and comes at a time when other public sector organisations, such as Scottish Water, are being criticised for outsourcing core work to contractors whose workers are on inferior conditions and suppressed pay and pensions, which, according to the STUC, leads to post-retirement poverty. Does the Minister expect the public to believe that an individual private contractor can deliver this service more efficiently than a national body? And if so, isn't that an indictment of this government's record on public services?
On the substantive question.
Yeah, on the substantive question around this particular instance, SEPA have undertaken a visual inspection and indeed have been able to say that the situation is stabilised and containment at source is proving effective. SEPA received reports of oil within the River Docket on Thursday evening and overnight worked through Friday and over the weekend to identify the source and mitigate its impacts. And a specialist clean-up contractor contracted by the garage has been working at the site and is carrying out works to reduce the environmental impact of the spill. Of course, SEPA officers are continuing to assess the progress of the specialist remediation contractors' clean-up.
Thank you. Question number 2, Stephen Kerr.
To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to the reported disclosure that £96.2 million has been spent by NHS Scotland on damages, legal expenses and associated costs linked to maternity and obstetric care.
Minister Jenny Minto.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Patient safety in maternity services is a key priority for the Scottish Government. That is why we established a new maternity and neonatal task force, and it is why the Patient Safety Commissioner is a member of this task force. Whilst the vast majority of women and babies receive excellent care when things go wrong, we expect boards to investigate fully, be honest with families and ensure lessons are learned. My heart goes out to any woman or her family who has not received the high standard of maternity and obstetric care we expect. It is very important to note the number or value of claims settled in any year does not directly correlate to an increase in incidents. As the member will appreciate, I cannot comment on the figures of individual boards. However, in the interest of transparency, a clinical negligence and other risks indemnity scheme report is published on an annual basis by NHS National Services Scotland. Latest published figures show that there has been a variability in the value of obstetrics and gynaecology claims. This reflects that the amount of expenditure on negligence claims in any year is often determined by a small number of high-value claims, which vary every year.
Stephen Kerr.
Well, Presiding Officer, let me first of all pay tribute to Hannah Brown at the Herald, Marion Scott at the Sunday Post and Lisa Summers at BBC Scotland's disclosure programme, and whistleblowers who are speaking up for keeping this troubling issue in the public eye. The safety of mothers and babies goes to the heart of our nation. And when we debated this in November, there was broad cross-party agreement that the concerns warranted a national investigation. £96.2 million is not just a number, it reflects trauma and loss. Instead, we have a task force that has met once, with no published remit or timetable. Here's what the Patient Safety Commissioner said. I worry that a task force that is so heavily government and NHS Scotland will be marking their own homework. If there's anything I'm finding, it's that closing rank and that attitude of there's nothing to see here. When will the Government order a fully independent national investigation?
Minister.
Stephen Kerr for his supplementary question, and agree that it is important that any situation in maternity services is highlighted and we find the right way to improve them. I'm very strong on that. I'm very clear on that. I'm very pleased that the Patient Safety Commissioner is an independent public advocate for patients on issues of safety, and she is a key part of the Maternity and Neonatal Task Force. We had our first meeting at the end of January. We have another meeting this month and a further one at towards the end of March. We are working through exactly what we need to do. There are specific work programmes that will be led by a variety of people, but I reiterate it is so important to have the Patient Safety Commissioner as an independent public advocate for patients on issues of safety within the task force.
Stephen Kerr.
Well, that answer, in a sense, goes to the heart of the concerns that many of us have, because reports from Healthcare Improvement Scotland reveal reoccurring weaknesses in how health boards learn from safety incidents. The Patient Safety Commissioner says many expectant mothers feel ignored by the system, and we know that staff feel unsafe to raise concerns because of the past treatment of whistleblowers. So I ask the Minister, what specific measures is she now taking to end this culture of secrecy and cover-up and ensure that health boards are held directly accountable when they fail to protect mothers and babies?
Minister.
I thank Stephen Kerr for his follow-up. I think it's important to recognise that the Healthcare Improvement Scotland reviews are providing very clear information about where there are areas that health boards are doing well, but also areas where health boards need to improve. These are ongoing reviews, and we are working together with the health boards to ensure that they are learning from these reviews. In fact, I was at NHS Ayrshire and Arran last week, and specifically talking to the Director of Midwifery to ensure that there was that cross-health board sharing of information and improvement. I would note as well that Mr Kerr references whistleblowing. He will know from previous questions he's asked in this area that the Cabinet Secretary and myself feel very strongly that staff should be allowed, should be recognised to whistleblow and ensure that their concerns are listened to clearly. That's exactly what the Scottish Government's listening work was. I would also say that the First Minister, the Cabinet Secretary and myself are very clear that health boards should be following up on the actions, on the recommendations that each of the Healthcare Improvement Scotland reviews have shown, and improving things. I'm very pleased that NHS Tayside has already has already reached the solution conclusion of the actions, but this is an ongoing process that has to ensure that we have the safest maternity services in Scotland.
Thank you. I appreciate members' interest in these important matters as ever, but I would be grateful if we can have concise questions and responses. I call Carol Mockin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Yesterday, the Patient Safety Commissioner warned that maternity services urgently needed to be redesigned to address safety concerns. She also warned that for rural maternity services, practical measures to ensure proper risk mitigation have not been fully explored. The Maternity and Neonatal Task Force overruled the Commissioner's ask that rural maternity care be reviewed separately. This is, of course, disappointing, as we know rural healthcare requires a distinct approach. So I ask, why was this overruled? And can I also ask the Government give an update on its recent engagement with NHS Dumfries and Galloway regarding maternity services in rural Stranraer?
Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I just underline to Carol Mockin that the review of rural has not been stopped? That is one of the key areas of progress and work that we are going to be making within the Neonatal and Maternity Task Force. The Cabinet Secretary has engaged
with Dumfries and Galloway. Clearly, the Scottish Government has continual engagement with the Rural Health Boards, but I want to underline that rural review has not been cancelled.
Willie Rennie.
The Parliament, with the support of the Government, agreed to an independent national investigation. Independent national investigation. Can the Minister explain what has changed since this Parliament agreed to that? What is different about the task force than what she had done before? Is there an independent element to this now?
Minister.
So I thank Willie Rennie for his question. The task force is currently looking at how we can do that independent review if it is deemed necessary. You will note from the Patient Safety Commissioner's comments to the Herald that's already been referenced that she questioned the need for the review, saying that what was important was that we have continual improvement, which is exactly what the Healthcare Improvement Scotland reviews of of maternity services is doing just now.
Finlay Carson.
We have the former Health Secretary, a former Health Minister and the Health Minister in the Chamber here who have heard over and over about the issues in Stranraer, and we've held an independent inquiry, and 3 independent clinicians suggested that midwife-led births should carry on in Stranraer. That was ignored by the Health Board. This is yet another review of a review. When will this Government start to take action and put the women's safety first?
Minister.
I thank Finlay Carson for his question, and the Scottish Government does put women's health and safety at the centre of the decision-making process. As I've responded previously to Mr Carson, the decision around Stranraer was made by the Health Board, Dumfries and Galloway Health Board, and it is them that make the decisions, which is why I have been very clear, given that I also represent a rural and island constituency, that we are providing, that health boards are providing the best support for women during their pregnancy journey.
Question number 3, Jamie Green.
To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to reports that Audit Scotland will investigate investment arrangements at ScotWind.
Cabinet Secretary Gillian Martin.
ScotWind reflects very significant market ambition for offshore wind. Scottish Water's delivering over £750 million in initial option fee revenues to public purse. And over time, ScotWind could raise several £billion more in rental revenues when projects become operational. So these revenues give us the flexibility to invest in long-term benefits for Scotland, helping to strengthen the limited fiscal levers we have under the UK Government's fiscal framework. And the Scottish Government looks forward to engaging with Audit Scotland once the full scope of the report is confirmed.
Jamie Green.
Could I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that? Of course, Scotland's renewable sector is a huge opportunity for us. It contributes over £6 billion GVA annually to our economy. But of this £755 million that was raised through the auction, which many folk believe was massively undersold at the time, surely that revenue should all have been about growing the economy, about hitting our net zero ambitions and creating well-paid jobs. The whole point of the ScotWind sell-off was to create a lasting legacy, not to simply use it as a short-term cash cow to fund public services. Given Audit Scotland's current interest in what is this money being spent on, can I ask the Government, what is this money being spent on?
Cabinet Secretary.
We don't have the full scope of Audit Scotland's audit into ScotWind, but can I just, the budget, of course, that the Liberal Democrats are supporting, I'll outline some of the areas in which we're investing ScotWind revenues in a range of projects for longer-term benefits for Scotland, to deliver our ambitions to tackle climate change, invest in growing the economy and create jobs, and to drive forward reform. So ScotWind funding for capital investment supports a range of projects that tackle climate change and support our net zero ambitions. Specific examples include supporting a just transition, including at Grangemouth, safeguarding its role as a leading industrial cluster, supporting our investment in the Nature Restoration Fund, which is at record levels for 2 years in a row, investing in inter-island connectivity, investing in a heat and buildings programme, and supporting woodland creation and peatland restoration, amongst many others.
Jamie Green.
I don't think people have a problem with the money going back into the Scottish budget, but I think the point being made, and this is why Audit Scotland clearly have taken an interest in it, is that this money should be going into a renewable sector, but it also should be going back into the communities that are hosting the infrastructure. Because if the principle is, as we believe, that private companies who make money from generating renewable energy should contribute back to the communities, I also believe the same should be true of the government, who have also made money from renewable energy. The reality is that communities are facing huge upheaval to host renewable infrastructure, and that community benefit must be part of the social contract with them. Places like Shetland have some of the highest fuel poverty rates around, but they would be hosting that ScotWind energy, and they haven't seen a penny from the windfall. So will the Scottish Government commit to giving those very communities that host Scottish renewable infrastructure their fair share of all the revenues that are received from it?
Cabinet Secretary.
Obviously, we're doing a great deal of work at the moment on how we can make sure that we capitalise on the new powers that have been given to mandate and community benefits on onshore renewables as well. And obviously, we fund Community and Renewables Energy Scotland, which allows communities to have their own renewable developments, as well as potentially even having repowering opportunities, a pilot that I just announced a couple of months ago, where you would have onshore renewables on land, on public land, which are up for repowering, which means that those communities will have first options on whether or not they want to bid for them as well. But Jamie Green does raise a wider point about going forward, as ScotWind developments are developed, how we make sure that we get community benefits associated with them, which is actually not rooted in the community. It's not in line of sight of each community, and that's work that is ongoing at the moment, because we want to make sure that over time, I've mentioned billions of pounds of revenue, we want to make sure that Scotland does benefit from that. But I think that some of the areas in which I've outlined are benefiting communities, particularly in the just transition area.
Thank you. Concise supplementaries, please. Katie Clark.
Scotland continues to lag behind the local content target of 60% in UK offshore wind farms. For example, there is no conditionality for local employment in the supply chain development statements that Crown Estate Scotland require developers to produce. So these statements require developers to account for how much they spend in Scotland, the UK, the EU and other countries, but do not convert these capital commitments to local job creation. So does the Cabinet Secretary recognise that for Scotland to meet both ambitious local content targets and meaningful employment, that there must be conditionality for local employment and training in the ScotWind process?
Cabinet Secretary.
I agree with that, and of course one of the advantages of having the Crown Estate devolved to Scotland is that we were able to put conditionality into the licence options. But one of the things that I've been told is causing the biggest gap in terms of local procurement is the transmission infrastructure build-out. There is no conditions around local procurement or even UK procurement within the build-out of transmission infrastructures, where we're seeing contracts going for cabling to companies that are based in mainland Europe rather than companies that are basing themselves in Scotland. So that's something that I've also been writing to the UK Government about. So I seem to be heckled by someone.
Let's hear one another.
So one of the things that I think that we need to have, we need to...
Let's hear the Cabinet Secretary.
One of the areas that we need to see is consistency around procurement, around all the contracts that could be available to local suppliers. And I'm not just saying in Scotland, UK-wide as well. We've got a great deal of work that's happening in the energy space around transmission infrastructure, and I would like to see conditionality around that as well. But Katie Clark does raise a point. If we're not seeing companies proving that they have local procurement, then obviously there'll be questions to ask about the viability of their licences.
Presiding
Officer, when anyone sells anything at an auction, the purpose is surely to get the best price. That's the point of an auction. So why did the Crown Estate set a cap at all? Why did it set it at £10,000 per square kilometre of the seabed? Why did it then increase that cap by 1,000% to £100,000? And was the Scottish Government involved, and did they agree to set a cap in the first place? And if so, why on earth did they do so? Because it's cost the taxpayer in Scotland billions of pounds of wasted, lost revenue.
Cabinet Secretary.
Obviously, we can't compare floating offshore wind with any fixed bottom type options licences, so it's unfair to talk about it in those terms if people are doing that. I know that some people are saying they're looking to what England and Wales are putting as far as their cap, but they are different developments, and there was obviously a great deal more capital expenditure involved in floating offshore wind and the more challenging conditions. As to the detail as to what the Scottish Government had by way of discussions around a cap or otherwise with the Crown Estate, obviously I wasn't Minister at the time. If there's any information on that, we will be providing that to Audit Scotland into their audit that they're taking forward.
And John Mason.
Thank you. Is the fundamental problem here not that the fiscal framework is flawed and we do not have the flexibility to save or to borrow in the way that we should have, and that's why the ScotWind money is having to be used in this way?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I think it's only right that ScotWind money, when it is used for things that are good for the benefit of people in Scotland. And hopefully I was able to illustrate some ways in which it has been used in this current budget. Obviously, as the Cabinet Secretary associated with climate action, I think it's a good use of money to involve ScotWind licensing revenues in things that make sure that we have a just transition and improve maybe the skills of our country to be able to adapt to the opportunities that we have. But obviously I agree wholeheartedly with John Mason's more central point that Scotland should be able to make all their fiscal decisions as an independent country.
Thank you. That concludes topical questions.